and not when I say people, not results, like as a leader, as a manager, as a boss, whatever it might be for even work, like yes, results is sometimes what we get graded on, but the results are a byproduct of the people that you have in place. All right, Pursuit of Balance, episode 31. What is up, everybody? We're going to talk about, I wrote 10 things down today. What makes leaders great leaders? A subject that I'm not really sure some of you might be excited about or not be excited about, but I personally love this subject. I used to read a lot of John Maxwell books and like leadership training and things like that, but this kind of came to fruition from I signed up for like this business scaling workshop that I'm going to in March for like it's basically like a 2-day thing in Vegas, and there's like some preliminary work and homework that I need to do for it. One of the videos was talking about leadership and asking questions about how management things were structured. So I kind of was like, oh, you know what? Like I always feel, because I talked to this with the manager meetings with like Glenn and Cisco, obviously being in leadership roles with management. But I think about this with everyone. Like I think to a certain degree, like we all are in leadership roles in different way. Some of us in business, some of us in management, some of us in sports, some of us at home, some of us as parents. But at the end of the day, I think like these skills are assets that can be transferred to any area of life, right? Like, and this is kind of one of those things, like I've done an episode forever ago on it, talking about like sales and communication, why I think like those are just like some of the foundational items that I think will make you just more successful in every area of life, right? And I look at leadership as the same way, right? And for me, it's an area that like I always just want to keep getting better at, because I think like for me, it's just like with my job in life, like it's just like allows me to just keep moving forward and, obviously becoming a parent in the future. And I think with business, like there's so much of that skill that I just want to keep mastering, right? So I wrote basically 10 things down that I want to share with you guys and like what makes leaders great leaders. So we're going to start from the top. Once again, I kind of start writing these things down, and I don't know if they're in a particular order, but as always, I think they come in an unconscious order no matter what. But number one is leadership is influence. It is not a position, right? So even on that subject of what I was just saying, it doesn't matter if I own a business, or it doesn't matter for Cisco and Glenn because they're managers, or like whatever role you are in life, just because you're a parent. Like when we think about what is leadership, I think the leadership is this idea that we have influence on people in a positive way, hopefully. But it's not just a title, right? I always think about that with like parenting as like an old adage that like a lot of parents use is because I'm your dad, because I'm your mom, right? Or because I'm your boss, right? It doesn't matter the position, because at the end of the day, what's going to make you a successful leader is your ability to create change, right? And foster change for people and create motivation for people. And that influence, and I've said this term a couple times before, that like I think the difference between influence and manipulation is just your intent, right? So like you can be a bad leader and still have influence, but that would be considered manipulation, right? So having influence on others was the first one that I wrote down. Second one I wrote down is great leaders go first, right? A couple things I wrote down was like owning mistakes publicly, apologizing without excuses. I love this line that people learn from what gets caught, not what gets taught, right? And then the last one I have is no job is outside of my description, right? So when I think about these things, even for myself, I think, there's like this old like drawing that I've always come back to in my head, that it's like this picture of like the workers in the front and then the boss getting towed by them. And it's like pointing his finger, like a boss leads from the back, right? Or works from the back. And then a leader is basically in the front lines, in the trenches with them and pulling their weight as well. So when I think about great leaders go first, I think like that line first, like when I think about like what gets caught versus what gets taught, I think about this with work all the time. And I actually will think even to look at this maybe even as a negative way sometimes in my entrepreneurship like journey. And here's what I mean by that is sometimes I think it's so important for me to just show face and be in the gym and do as much as I can, right? Like, so it doesn't matter if it's cleaning, or if it's folding towels, it's like whatever the role is, right? Like I do a little bit of everything besides check-in now. So like I'm still coaching classes, I'm still doing PT, I'm still doing sales, I'm still doing inventory, I'm still doing management meetings, I'm still doing coach meetings, I'm still cleaning, I'm still taking trash out every day. But, I think it's because A, like it's just the standard that I want to live by with work. And B, I think it's important for me to like showcase that stuff. Like I want the people that are working with me to see that like, oh, he's not above a pay grade of like, oh, I don't do that. I used to always hate that. Even when I was in management and other jobs that like people are like, well, that's not my job description. I'm like, you're never going to excel in life because like, like there is no job description when you think about leadership. Like leadership is like leading from the front, being in the front. But then also like the other things too. It's like, if you're saying one thing and doing another thing, you don't look like you have a lot of integrity as a human being, right? And I think about that a lot with work, but I think about that more with parenting. Like me and my wife always talk about like, well, like, we're not nervous about parenting, but like, when we have kids in the future, like how we know we're going to raise good kids, how we know we're going to do these things. And I'm like, well, we're good humans and we're going to remain good humans. And as long as we have the ability to stay that way and showcase the lifestyle of how our values are and our principles and what we live by and share that, then I think we're going to at least have a good advantage than some people maybe that don't have that, right? Because just the idea of like, okay, I just need to tell the kid to do something and it's going to do it. It's not the reality. It's not how humans work, let alone children. So that's number 2. Number 3, safety is greater than motivation, right? So fear creates compliance. It does not create commitment. That's always something I like to say to myself is like not using a tactic of fear as a driver for change. I think about this a lot, even with just the marketing of the business. And like one of the things I think bugs me the most about this fucking world is that we use fear and we use anger to, get eyeballs, right? I think that's obviously why I don't really watch the news and why I try to ignore most shit on social media. It's like, I think most of it is just this fear-based driven kind of approach, right? And I get it because like it works. People are attracted to it. That's how our psychology works. I'm not here to argue that it doesn't. But what I mean by safety is like, another thing I wrote down is people won't tell the truth if the truth gets punished, right? So like we want to create an environment for someone to feel comfortable, right? Like our nervous system is always auto-regulating our environment, like where we are with people, where we are with our relationship, where we are with work. Like if I'm a kid and I'm afraid to be me, I'm afraid to talk to my mom or dad, I'm afraid to share something with school, I'm afraid to do whatever, that's going to be a great way to maybe create a short-term compliance out of fear. But it's going to bury a lot of emotions. It's going to bury a lot of things. Like one thing that I was always very grateful with my just relationship with my parents and just like as a kid, and some people worse than others, like they say that's funny even now. And people are like, oh, you tell your parents that? Or like you do that in front of your parents? I'm like, my parents are human beings like the rest of us, right? And like they're my parents. So I never was like, oh, I need to hide this from my parents, right? I was always very vocal about it. My middle brother, Jesse, was, he always got in more trouble as between us brothers. And it's because he had the opposite effect. He thought like, oh, hiding it or like keeping things to the side or hopefully that doesn't get caught. And that's just an interesting point of view that it's like even the same family, but we had different experiences, right? But like I never felt that when I was just like honest with what I was. But I also think that like I never really was punished when I was honest, right? And like that's something I think that like that safety over fear and why I put that down is like, we want to be able to work in places where we feel comfortable and safe enough to be ourselves, right? And for me with work, then I wrote this down in another one, like I think autonomy was always something that like I craved when I was working at other companies, and it's probably the biggest thing that I tried to provide or I guess give a sense of autonomy for the other members here, the other team members here. Of like, doesn't matter if you're a coach or a manager or whatever, a front desk person. Like, I want to give you enough autonomy to learn the skills that you need to do, but also not to be controlled or myopically micromanaged the entire time. But that I think obviously kind of creates an environment of feeling more safe too as well. Number 4, clarity and direction. This one for me has always been a big one because I think like vague standards equal emotional reactions later, right? And this is something I dealt with a lot when I first got into management, and I still deal with this a little bit. But it's like if I want to create change as a coach, if I want to create change as a manager or a leader at work, if I want to create change at home with my wife or my future kids, there needs to be clarity in the standards and operations and everything that I do because like, poor instructions are going to lead to poor results. It's something I've kind of always framed in my head. Like clear directions are going to give you clear results, right? So like a lot of times it's normal for us to get frustrated because we think that the other person across from us is thinking the same way that I do, right? Like, oh, that's how I think. Why would they not think that way, right? Or that's how I would have done it. Why would you not do it that way, right? But it's not, once again, it's not the reality, right? I think the reality of like how humans operate is like we need clarity in the direction that we're going, right? So when we think about leadership, it doesn't matter if it's, getting your kid through school or through sports, or if it's, getting your employees to move up. Like obviously one of the famous sayings is great leaders create more leaders, right? Not more followers. So it's like we want to foster environments to do so, but like the only way we can do that is making sure that we're very clear from the front end of like what the standard is, what the systems are in place, what the operations, how you do it, like taking through that. Like the goal is not to hold someone's hand the entire time. The goal might be to hold your hand and show you everything in the beginning, but my goal is to let go, right? My goal is to be able to have you foster those things, but that only gets created if I'm very clear on the front end of what that journey looks like. Right? Not just like, what am I doing today or what am I doing to keep my job? It's like, no, what are you doing today and what are we working towards, right? And being more clear about that is going to help. Number 5, leaders develop people, not just results. The thing that I wrote down is I will punish you into success and not give up on you. And this is a quote that, what's his name? What's the guy from NVIDIA? I'm going to forget his name. Jensen Huang, I think, or whatever. He has this quote that he was like on this big forum, and the guy asked him, the person that was interviewing him, and he goes like, do you fire people? Or like, what's your belief on firing people? And he goes, honestly, like I kind of have like the opposite mindset towards it. And he goes, for me, I think I have a little bit of empathy because I started as a janitor and I've worked my way up to become a CEO. I was actually reading that article because it's probably about a month ago now, that talking about like the guy that's the CEO of Nike now. And it's like, he started as an intern and he worked his way up. I love those stories for me personally. But he says this quote, right? He basically goes like, I would much rather punish somebody into success versus give up on them, right? And certain people, like I know, like this is a story I think on Elon actually probably a month or two ago. I was like watching a podcast and he was saying like, you don't give a fuck. If you can't keep up with like what he wants, he's out. Right. And obviously I don't want to disregard Elon and his success. He's very brilliant in what he does, but maybe as a leader, he's not going to be the best fit for everyone. Right. And for me, I love Jensen's like quote because I personally have kind of always had that, like I've adopted that mindset. And I've always had that mindset that like, it's much easier to work on somebody and keep growing them and keep supporting them and keep finding ways to, because everyone is different. Like how I treat one coach is not going to be the same as I treat another coach. But I'd rather in the sense of the analogy, beat them up into success. Like I'd rather like work as hard as I can to make it work for you versus be like, fuck it, I'm giving up. Let's go hire somebody else. Because in my opinion, like hiring and starting over is starting over, right? So I almost feel like it can be more work. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that no one should ever be fired. I think people should be fired. Some people don't belong in certain positions, or certain roles or certain things. But I'd much rather focus on like my goal is to develop people, right? And not when I say people, not results, like as a leader, as a manager, as a boss, whatever it might be for even work, like yes, results is sometimes what we get graded on, but the results are a byproduct of the people that you have in place, right? Like for me, I think about like with functional lifestyle success, I give majority of that success to the team, right? It's like, yeah, sure, I've developed the model, I developed the systems, I built the back end, I do the marketing, like I do a lot of stuff outside of maybe the hands-on stuff now. But what makes it successful, I always say it to this way to the team. When people go read reviews, they don't go and say, oh, Corey developed a great thing. Most of the time it's like, I love this coach. Their energy is amazing. It's always about the coaches, right? It's about the people. And I always remember that, like, okay, for me, it's like if I want to build a great business, like I need to have great people, and having great people requires a lot of work. Sometimes I'll get lucky and people will fall in my lap and I'm just like, wow, this is like someone that like borderline needs help. Like they just need to be guided in whatever direction or supported in whatever direction they want to. But for most of us, like as managers, like it takes work, just like how it is with a client to build them and develop that skill set too. All right, number 6, this is a huge one for me. And what I mean by for me is something I notice the most is emotional regulation. I've always said this quote that if you can't control your emotions, you are going to be controlled by those who can, right? And I wrote that one down because I use it all the time. Some people, I remember I posted that like a couple years ago. They'd be like, I don't know if I agree with that. And I'm like, well, that's okay. You can have your opinion just like I have mine. But I think when you think about I would say most things are going to be hard in life. The reason why most people can't handle hard shit is because they can't regulate their emotions, right? And emotional regulation is not perfect. It's something I think on a continuum, you're either better at it than not. It's not like I'm perfect or not. I think it's a skill that needs to be refined. I think it's a skill that needs to be practiced. But like for me, I have always said that with like training, that I think like training is a great way for us to practice doing hard things, because the harder the things you do in life are, the easier the life will feel, right? If you always choose the easy route, the harder the life will feel in the long run, right? Like short term, like difficulty equals long term, ease, right? And then obviously it can be the inverse. So emotional regulation as a leader, as a parent, and this is probably, I would say, from my just view of other people sometimes, right? When I'm like, okay, what would I change about that? And I see this probably more with parenting than I do with business, but you definitely see it with business too. Is an inability for someone to manage their emotions, for me, is a lack of self-control, and maybe even a lack of maturity and self-responsibility to a degree. But it's also like, and this could be sound fucked up, but I've always said this, like when I worked at other jobs and I had someone that was above me by title and I knew they had no emotional regulation, like I almost felt cocky and confident that I was like, I'll be able to take this person's job in no time. Because like if they can't regulate their emotions, like they're easy to control, right? And that's like, unfortunately, I think where we are in this world is so many people are easy to control because they have no emotional regulation. They have no ability to think for themselves. And it makes me sad because like that is a skill that takes time to build, and it's a skill that should be refined over time. But it should be a priority, right? Because your inability to manage that just sets you up to be controlled by others, right? And like the biggest thing that we can do to take control of our lives is learning how to regulate that, right? So emotional regulation, I think, is a big one, because once again, coming back to that initial term of like what gets caught, not taught, right, is what obviously gets seen. So it's like if I see a leader that's always getting frustrated or always making a big deal out of certain things or always complaining about that, like what do you think the environment's going to look like? Like you are the energy, right? You control that, right? So it's like if I'm a parent at home and I'm always angry, I'm always upset, I'm always loud, like whatever it is, like that's the energy you're fostering, right? If I go to work and this boss is always complaining or always bitching about other people behind their back or bitching about the client, what do you think you're creating? Right. So I think the ability to, I look at this as kind of like wearing mask. I think like sometimes like my point of view with work is like we get to play a character, right? I think like, and I don't mean this is like a fake thing, but I think like how I am at home with my wife is different than how I am with like my team. And how I am with my friends is different than how I am with my team and my wife. Like, so I think like there's different masks and different characters and different people that we can be different with. But as a leader, obviously specific to this episode, like that's a big thing to think about. Right. 7, consistency builds trust more than intensity. Last week I touched on this when it comes to exercise, right? That obviously having intensity is going to be a thing to obviously achieve goals, but more importantly, having consistency over a long period of time is going to equal results. I think about this with business a lot, right? Because for me, it's funny when people say like, oh, business must be hard, right? And I think about this because I used this a couple times last week in the episode where I was like, I don't think like exercise or business is hard. And I want to have some context here. When you think about like, okay, what are the mechanics? What are the tactical, like, what are the things that I need to learn to be successful in business? Like, okay, if I can become good at sales, if I can become good at marketing, if I can become a good coach and good with fulfillment and good with accountability and retention, like once I understand the moving parts of the machine of a business, like that's not hard. What I do think makes it hard is the ability to be consistent over a very long period of time, right? Like even the cleaning up part I was just talking about. Like it's funny, there's so many times where I'm like, I catch myself doing stuff that I'm like, well, I did not see myself 10 years later and owning a business still doing these things, right? And I think that's because I didn't know what I didn't know. And I also, like, to be honest with you, like I enjoy being in person and I enjoy doing the work because I just need to be busy. I like working. But if you were to ask me 10 years ago when I started the business, I'd be like, oh, I'd have a few locations. I'd probably just be doing manager meetings. Like I really didn't know what my future looked like, right? But now being here, like fast forwarding almost a decade, it's like I realized that like, I just enjoy doing the work. But it's I don't know, it's a weird thing. Like as I say it out loud, like sometimes it's just funny to think about it. Like I'm like, did I think I was gonna be here? And like some parts of me of like, of course, like you knew you wanted to do this forever. And some parts of this I'm like, well, that's the evolution of an entrepreneur. Is you're gonna be doing less of that crap on the bottom as you progress over time, as the business grows. And the reality is like I'm still here doing that stuff sometimes, right? So when I say consistency builds trust, right? Doing the boring things well, right? The thing I put down. And then the second thing is I put show up the same way every day, right? So when I say doing the boring things well, is there's going to be lots of little moving parts to every job and every position. For me, it's like I always say emails are that. Like I cannot stand emails. I really do not like emails, right? I hated doing billing, right? I gave billing away to my wife because it's just, she has better control of those things. When it comes to, I'll actually touch on this. When it came to emotional regulation, I didn't really have much of it when it came to billing. Something that I've learned through business, not just the gym, but just business in general, is when money is involved, people will change, right? And the hard part is 90+% of people that I work with in business, client wise, are cool. They're accommodating. Like for me, it was like this is just like I treat people how I would like to be treated. If I went to a business and like I didn't show up, like I always tell this story with the tanning. Back in the day, I used to go to tanning beds and shit like that. And I didn't go to one for 4 years and I paid for it every month. I didn't go in there and be like, well, can I get a refund for all the time I didn't use? Like I don't call Comcast and say I was gone for 2 weeks. Can I get a half a refund? I realized with billing, I was like, oh my God, this is frustrating me because like people are changing when it comes to money involved, right? But boring things is like there's parts to every job that I think can be boring by definition, right? And for my example, what I was kind of before I took that weird tangent was like emails. It's like I'm like, oh, I don't enjoy doing emails. Don't enjoy doing billing. Payroll is kind of annoying, but I do those things because I understand it's part of the job. It's part of the reps, right? And think about workouts. It's like, do I want to warm up and do I want to do the cool down stretch? And the answer is like, not really. It's kind of the boring part, but like we do it, right? Like we do those things well because that's what the thing that's going to lead to sustainability and growth, right? Same exact thing for this example. The other one I say when I say show up the same day every day, this is kind of in relationship to what I was just talking about. If you're showing up and one day you're energized and one day you're low, one day you're angry, one day you dress like crap, one day you put yourself together, there's no consistency in the presentation. There's no consistency in the personality. I think that can be a downfall because like trust is built through consistency. It's not built through like one day being great. I had a coach that I worked with at FL for a very long time. And I used to always tell him, I was like, dude, some days you're on, some days you're off. When you're on, you're one of the best coaches I know. When you're off, it's like toxic to everybody. Coaches and clients see it. And that loses trust, right? Like the first thing that happened in that situation is I lose trust in the person. I'm like, I don't know who I'm getting today. Right. So when you think about being a good leader, it's like there's so much that sometimes needs to get pushed to the background behind the curtains to be handled separately, not to be unhandled, not to just bury and ignore it, but like just to be handled separately from the time that you're dealing with it. So that's obviously a huge thing, right? It's like that consistency is going to be the thing that's going to foster the trust for your team, right? Number 8, leaders ask better questions versus the answers they give. This obviously kind of foundation of like communication and sales a little bit of something I've talked about in the past, but like, number 1, building autonomy. Well, it helps build autonomy. Number 2, it creates buy-in. And number 3, it teaches them how to think, not what to think, right? This has always been my argument with the school system is I think the school system is a great way for us to just like memorize things and we're taught what to think. We're not taught how to think, right? And there's a very, very big difference between those two philosophies. Creates buy-in for me was always a big thing because like understanding, like for me, for example, it's like I have 17 people on this team and I have 17 different individuals, right? Even though we all have the same company that we work for, even though we have the same clients that we work for, even though we have the same mission and purpose and drive, we also do have, 17 different individuals as far as their personality, what their needs are, what their desires are, what their goals are, what their work-life balance wants to look like, their personality and energy of how they're going to present themselves, how they want to be managed. But I wouldn't know that if I just talk to people and tell them how to do things. Like I learned that through asking those questions, right? And more sometimes not even asking questions, but just observing and listening. Communication is majority nonverbal. So you can learn through someone's words, but you can learn through someone's body language and actions. And, sometimes I'll have one-on-one meetings and I'll just be clear. I'm like, I just feel like something's off. Not sure what it is, but I feel like something's off. And sometimes they'll talk about something. Sometimes like, no, I'm just going through a little thing right now, but I'd rather not talk about it. I'm like, cool. Just I want you to understand I'm here to talk if you need something to talk. But like for me, it's like when I think about leadership, asking those questions or observing and not just being like, this, my famous quote has always been like, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, meaning like we're built to listen more than we are to talk. So you learn through observation and intake. You don't learn through speaking, right? And leadership is that dynamic thing where it's not a destination. You're not just a leader. You're always continuing to build on becoming a better leader over time. Number 9, big one I touched on probably about a month ago. Service is the highest form of leadership, right? A famous quote that has always stuck with me that Gary Vee says is, if you're a CEO and you think that you have employees under you, you're thinking about this wrong. You should be a CEO thinking I'm working for other people. And I've loved that statement, and I'm not joking. It lives rent-free in my head for the rest of my life. Like, I try to view my role with my work as I work for other people, right? Like, even though at the top of the chain and on the paperwork and on the building, it's okay, there's one name there. Really, that outside of that title, I'll be honest with you, I fucking wish my name wasn't on it half the time so I could just be a ghost in the background. But like, as far as work goes, like, I view my work as like, I'm here to serve other people, right? I'm here to help my managers feel supported so they can grow their coaches. I'm here to help my coaches feel supported and learn more so they can service the clients. I'm here to help the clients achieve their goals and whatever that might be. But I'm here to be of service for other people. If I ever looked at it the other way around, if these people are here to work for me, then I view that as a dictator. I don't view that as a leader, right? Like, I think, once again, it can come back to this like fear-based approach. Sure, you'll create some compliance every once in a while. But when I think about like a big goal for me, like as far as like employee goes, it's retention. Like, I want to foster the best culture I can for like work where everyone shows up excited to work with each other. And I also want to create an environment where it's like an open-ended, what do they call it? Open source platform where it's like basically everyone's contributing to the growth. It's not like this is what we're doing because I said it, right? It's like, so that was always just like a framing for me that I've always lived by. It's just like, I work for other people, right? I have 17 people that I work for, right? I have clients that I work for. And that mindset allows me to kind of be of service versus just be passive and just expect shit to be done for me. Because, I think there's always a balancing act. I'm not saying like if you're a leader or an owner or a manager or a parent that like your job is to work for your children and work for your employees. Like, there's obviously a line of respect that needs to be given. Like, a line of respect that I give to my mom and dad, a line of respect that I give to my bosses that when I was working, a line of respect that I give to anybody that's above me in any degree of, however we want to look at that. Like, there needs to be that. But I think a framing of like the mindset is also a great way to look at it too. Number 10, last one. I kind of touched on this actually just a second ago, but the best leaders are still being led. Ego will kill leadership growth faster than anything, right? And I think this kind of polishes up a little bit of what I was just framing on, that leadership is not a destination. It's something that is a process of always becoming a better leader. And you becoming a leader through consistency, like I mentioned earlier, means consistency is forever. Consistency is the rest of your life if you want to be like thought at as a leader. If I want to be a good parent, I got to be parenting as well as I can for the rest of my life. If I want to be a good boss with work, I don't just do it once and I give up on it, right? Like, it's something that we need to do forever. And the growth behind it, and this is why I will always be the number one advocate that I think the most important thing that most of us can do is self-education, right? Finding mentors, educating ourselves, asking for feedback, learning from your mistakes, understanding that failures are a part of the process, where the failure is the best education we can give, and also learning from success. I know a lot of times, like most of us like to say, oh, failure is where we learn and success is not. It's like, that's not true. I hear that quote sometimes, and like, well, obviously we can learn from success. It's not all fucking an accident. Like, there's some luck to success. I get it. There's some timing in the market. There's some like just opportunities that fall in your lap. But for the most part, success is a great teacher as well. But in the relationship to leadership, like, if we want to be a good leader with ourselves, we want to be a good leader in any role that you apply to life, understand that it's something that requires growth along with the people that you're leading, right? Like, as a leader, expecting other people to become better over time and to continually grow and the business to continue to grow and the kid to develop and grow, you need to grow with them, right? And as you guys grow together, it's exponential, right? If you don't grow and eventually, someone starts to surpass you, there's a chance you don't become the leader anymore, right? So that's a big thing. So I wrote down those 10 things, like I said, in no particular order. I hope this resonates with somebody. I know this might be a little bit of an off-topic one, but for me, it's something that I find a lot of interest in and something I spend a lot of personal time on, of just like, how can I be better at certain things as far as my role in life, with leadership, with communication, with, sales, marketing, all those other tactics. But leadership, I think, is like one of those interesting things like communication, where it's not just business specific, right? It's not specific to one kind of avenue or modality. It's something that you can use on a bunch of different platforms in life. And even more importantly, just like with yourself, right? With the expectations that you have out in front of yourself, like, you need to be a good leader that can foster that as well. Okay. All right, guys. Well, as always, I will see you next week. Take care.